Leila Entezam, welcome to Lucid Commons.
Thank you. Good morning. Great to be here.
I'm so happy to have you here. Can you tell us who is Leila Entezam?
I can. So technically, Leila Entezam is a neuro-emotional performance coach. I work with high performers on mastering their emotions, understanding blind spots, understanding why they do what they do, regulating emotions. More than that, Leila is a nature-loving brain nerd, someone who believes in the human potential for change and in self-love and grace, and a lover of understanding human behavior and all the little things we can do to just try to be our best self every day.
Can you share how you found your way to the brain? What is it about the brain?
It's so funny. I get asked this question all the time of like, how did you end up where you are? And I honestly, like there wasn't this traditional path. I really can't tell you. So I studied neuroscience in undergrad because I was a pre-med major, and I'm sure I didn't even know what neuroscience was, at 18, 17, when you're picking a major for college. But whatever it was, thank God it fell in my lap and I fell in love with it. And then that led to the next thing was, okay, well, I'm pre-med, but I'm really struggling through this. This is not my niche. So I switched to getting an MBA afterwards. And that was much easier for me and much more sort of not swimming against the current. A couple decades in business and different titles, interim CEO, project work, etc., climbing some ranks there. But there was always something missing in that work. And so I got another master's in psychology, and I'm a licensed mental health therapist. I don't practice clinically. It was a way to be super immersed in spending 3,000 hours having to understand human behavior so that you have a deep understanding of what causes sustainable behavior change at a fundamental level. Why do we do what we do, and how do you change that in the best way possible when it's something that you want to change? And then that led to something called coaching. And then coaching kept morphing into the specific population that I was coaching. And that ended up landing on high performance, high performers and coaching that niche more than anything. And then most of my audience, most of my clients are men just by default, not because I don't work with women, but just because that's how it happens statistically. And I saw the same thing sort of happening over and over again, and to the point where I could literally, Tatiana, like write a script about what these high performers were experiencing in terms of getting to a certain place in life and then just feeling this emptiness. And I could write a script and just fill in their name. And so I wrote a book called The Heart of Peak Performance, Emotional Mastery for High Performing Men. That was to say, okay, here's a guide of sort of the methodology and some of the tools that I use, so that if I can't serve everyone in this one-on-one model, I can try to at least sort of leave people with this guide. And so here we are.
Can you share, over the course of that 3,000 hours and even over the course of the years in coaching men, high performers, what did you notice about human behavior and the capacity for change?
That fundamentally, we all have these same drivers. We want to be seen and loved and feel safe and heard. And that, the in particular for high performers, that the more high performance, the more highly you perform, and the more so much of that ends up being fueled by your ego, which can be a great thing and create drive and can do all that. And then a lot of times what happens is underneath it you haven't built this solid foundation of sense of self and sort of balance in your life, which creates this, oh my God, on the outside, it looks like everything is amazing. And on the inside, I'm lost as heck.
That's relatable. I've been there very recently. I will share at 29, finally doing the work of, okay, like, who am I? I joke that I'm 2 decades ahead of my midlife crisis, trying to figure out who am I before it happens to me when I'm like 55, right? So I'm curious, what have you found in coaching high performing men? Why do we never do the work? And we can extrapolate to society, not just high performing men in general, but how is it that we can get through a careers, multiple, without building a sense of self?
I think we're better served even expanding that to your point about general audience, because it is so much more universally applicable. And that it is because increasingly the accessibility to distractions is free and ever present, and there's so much noise. So there are so many things that I can escape to for maladaptive coping, and social media and gambling and different addictions. And so it's so easy to escape to those things, and the idea of doing deep inner work can feel intimidating, and people have this false notion that if they open that door they're going to get stuck there. And so it creates this notion that, what, that kind of feels like a lot, let me just do some of these low-hanging fruits that seem easy and let me disconnect.
Yeah, I mean, having gone through it myself, I will say it's a lot. It feels pretty messy sometimes, and it's hard work. I feel like we already all have enough on our plates, right? We don't need to create the added mental baggage and emotional baggage that does sometimes come with building a sense of self and asking the big question, who am I? So that seems to be a pattern that you see, right? People fall into life, they get too busy, there's distractions, there's all this noise, and they just don't have the time. Is it the time or the will to want to create that space to explore really who they are?
I think it's the fear, because
Mm.
the time or the will or the resource or the whatever becomes the thing I tell myself, oftentimes out of the fear. And
Mm.
what happens is we forget that our brains have finite bandwidth. It is not this infinite resource, and most of what you do is subconscious. So whatever you are avoiding is also eating part of this bandwidth. And just because you're not giving it attention doesn't mean that it's not occupying some of that bandwidth. And so you're better served leaning into taking a look at that, so that you are more the author of that narrative and in control of that, rather than just letting it buzz in the background thinking you're avoiding it. Your brain doesn't work like that. It is one brain, there's one database, and there is not, I always tell people, oftentimes, in particular for high performers, they think, oh, I'm really good at compartmentalizing. That's great. You can have this idea of, sort of thinking that you're giving something less attention, but just because you feel like you put it in a compartment absolutely doesn't mean it went away. It is still there, buzzing in the background.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree with that. I recently read about brain drain and how just having your phone sitting out on your desktop or within your field of vision, within your line of sight, expends cognitive resources in the background because you are fighting the urge to pick up your phone and check your phone. That's what I think of in avoiding questions that we think just we compartmentalize or sit beneath our subconscious. We don't think that they're taking up cognitive resources, but they are. We all those open
Absolutely.
tabs, they stay open.
Absolutely. I
Um,
think most of us are so unaware of all the things that are really eating away at our bandwidth. Your brain's number one job is survival. And in order to do that most optimally, all day, every day, it is taking in everything around you and processing and discarding and processing and discarding. And when you go to sleep at night, it's doing sort of that housekeeping and filing away and everything, during your sleep. And so, all of that is present. And again, back to the idea that we're consuming so much today, and most of it is truly garbage. There's a lot of housekeeping to do. And so
mhm.
it is, there is a lot of noise to work through.
So I want to ask first, can you define a high performer? What does that look like? And generally, do they have a more difficult time focusing their attention when the world is so noisy? What makes a high performer, in your opinion?
So I'll give you my definition from my scope and my universe, because there's absolutely going to be so many different definitions of that. In my realm, it is someone who is able to achieve things beyond the sort of average population. They're able to focus and push through and work at a level that others can't, and they're able to keep going long after others stop, and achieve things at a much higher level. They have a much faster processing speed in their brain than the average person. It's one of the reasons they struggle with communication, because your only frame of reference is your own brain. So you don't understand that, hey, it took me, a fraction of a second to process something and it took you 3 seconds, but I don't understand that your brain processes differently than mine. And so I don't understand why you aren't keeping up. And then you don't, you're frustrated. Why am I going so fast? And then we miss the mark on each other. And so in my realm, those are some of the attributes of a high performer. And then I think your question had a second part.
Yeah. So do you find that high performers, is it easy for them to focus their attention on themselves and changing? What does that look like when you start doing the work?
I think it depends. They are great at being able to quiet noise and hyper focus and get things done, and quiet sort of emotional noise of fear and hesitation and things like that, to be able to again move beyond where most people stop. And so, for example, that's one of the things that gets them to take risks that most people aren't willing to take, in terms of entrepreneurship, for example. But when it comes to a realm where they feel like they're out of their element, like an emotional space, then they are much more hesitant, much more fearful, because they think, hey, this is really foreign to me. I don't know that I can succeed there. I'm not well equipped. I might get stuck there. I don't know what's going to happen to me. I don't know if it's going to sort of, debilitate me. And so that's what creates this interesting space where give them 10 other challenges and they will dive in and knock it out of the park. But tell them, hey, let's dive deep on your emotional landscape. And they're like, I'm good.
Absolutely. That is so relatable. As somebody who's very cerebral and lives in my head, that's one thing that I've found really challenging, is recognizing how to live in my body, and my emotions and how I'm feeling actually inform what's happening up here in my head, right? So let's get in tune with those. And I think that emotional regulation, so that's a huge part of what you're doing here in your coaching, is emotional regulation. Okay. So
It's
this is
allowing you to not fear emotions, so that
Mhm.
you can trust it's safe to lean into them,
Mm.
and sort of demystifying them as this thing that is like, hey, I don't really know about that space.
Mm. One thing that you had said earlier is this word emptiness, and I'm thinking of I recently read Dr. Judith Joseph's book on high functioning depression, and that is a trait of people, usually high performers, who live with high functioning depression. On the outside, like you were saying, they're achieving all the things, they're doing all the things, they can solve all these problems, excelling in every domain. But when they sit still for a moment, because perhaps they do not want to sit with their emotions or don't know how to process emotions, right? They feel a sense of emptiness or numbness, or sometimes a sense of restlessness. And so they go and do the next thing. And so I'm wondering, in high performers, and what I just read and discovered, I felt that I was reading this book and I'm like, oh God, this is me. Ugh. Like, I'm not just burnt out. I think I actually have high functioning depression. So I'm wondering, in your work with high performers and this kind of need to fill a void, maybe when they're feeling empty or restless, do you think there's something a little bit more there than, well, you just need to get in touch with your emotions and explore who you are?
So there is a disproportionate amount of depression, anxiety, mental health challenges in high performers, CEOs, entrepreneurs. And part of the challenge is that it goes unannounced and unaddressed. And so that already is a thing. There's also a disproportionate amount of high performers that come from some adverse childhood, and so that, it adds another element to it. So as you paint the picture of this persona, you see that there is more and more opportunity and justification for them to feel depression, anxiety, emptiness, any of these things, while also not having space to address it, not feeling like they can address it, not feeling understood. One of the things that happens a lot for high performers is that, let's say, for example, therapy or coaching, they will go try to work with someone. And again, they process at a much faster speed. And so they start trying to, create space and open up to this person, but they process 10 times faster than you do. So by the time you have an answer or a thing to say, they are 10 steps ahead of you. So they've already checked out. And so now they're bored. So this didn't work. So, it doesn't. So they kind of give up on that. They are such a niche audience that requires this intimate understanding that it is, your original question was, do you think it's depression or something else? I think it's all the above. And that coupled with, go back to, it's all the above, and they have this greater preponderance. Oh, and by the way, there is more opportunity for distraction, and there's more noise and maladaptive coping. You're creating a ripe landscape for, hey, there's a lot going on, and I'm not gonna address it. And then it's a closed loop system in your sort of, internal landscape. And so you're putting pressure on one part of it. It has, nowhere to go in this closed loop system. So it puts pressure on another part, which leads to, the addiction and drinking and, other forms of behavior that look for some release because you're not addressing this pressure.
Okay. Let's dwell on maladaptive coping mechanisms. So can you dive into, okay, what is a healthy coping mechanism? And in today's day and age, what do you see as maladaptive? And what do you coach these high performers on in terms of healthier coping mechanisms?
Sure. So healthy is anything, journaling, exercise, gardening, cooking, something in nature, social connection, a spiritual practice, some kind of centering, meditation, anything that promotes sort of a greater health, mental, physical, emotional, doesn't matter. Maladaptive would be anything that allows you to escape that. Looking at something, or, leaves you no more fulfilled at the end of that than when you started. So social media, gambling, addiction, porn, drinking, drugs, you name it.
For high performers, do you think staying busy, doing more work, can work be a maladaptive coping mechanism?
It absolutely becomes, hey, here's a place where I am successful and I know what I'm doing, and I am it's reinforced. And so I will just dive myself more and more into work.
What do you find is the hardest part about leading people, men in your population that you coach, to change? Because I find that we know as human beings, it's first principles. We biologically, we resist change, although we are systems of change and evolution, right, on a macro level. So in general, change is hard. We don't like change. So how do you help guide people through a positive change, not just a change, but a transformation?
I think it's a couple things. One is that, especially with my population, if I didn't have the science background, it would be easier for them to dismiss so much of it. And so already coming to the table, so often what I hear is, listen, this stuff is foo-foo. So, I don't, what's the point? And so there is a science component that says, here's a bunch of research-based, evidence-based work that substantiates what we're saying. Then here's the psychology and human behavior piece of that, that shows what that science is trying to express. So that's one element in terms of doing that. The other is that it is oftentimes it's you. I always tell people I care more about why you do what you do than what you do. The what is the external manifestation. It is just the what happened as a result of the why. The why is what drove the behavior. And so it is trying to support people in understanding why so that you can create more sustained behavior change. And so between leaning in with science, between saying, hey, we're trying to understand the why so that we can change the what, and then expressing that it is a slow process. It doesn't look like ROI on a spreadsheet with you can measure it. So often leaders will tell me, hey, I don't really notice anything. Hey, nothing's changed and it's been 6 months or whatever. And I tell them it doesn't work like that. You don't look on a spreadsheet. Okay, this project is now complete. Self-awareness complete. It doesn't, it's a sort of gradual over time. And then you kind of wake up and you look around and you think, that's kind of different. I feel kind of different. I engaged with that kind of differently. And so that becomes another piece of the challenge. And then the other thing with change is that there are certain sort of drivers to change. Either I change because not changing becomes greater and sort of more expensive than change. For example, my spouse says, hey, listen, I'm fed up, I'm leaving. Or the board says, hey, listen, this behavior's got to change or you're going to have to go. Or it is something in you is motivated, inspired towards change. Let's say, for example, you had your first child and you think, oh my God, I want to change my ways because this was so moving.
Okay. So there's certain motivators. I will say, just since you mentioned that one, I think that could have been a trigger for me because we had our first daughter last year. So very relatable. I think there are certain life events that do trigger a change. Whether you want it or not, it's happening. It's coming. It's coming, right? So I'm curious.
And otherwise,
Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to add. Otherwise, it's your brain has a lot of work to do with very little real estate. It doesn't look for something to do unless it actually it doesn't like to do something unless it has to. So this idea of like you want me to spend a bunch of resource towards change, you better sort of give me a justifiable reason why I'm going to go expend that energy doing that.
Okay, can we dig into the neuroscience here for a second? And when you say we know the brain is a very efficient organ. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
So if you think about, I have to monitor your entire universe 24/7. And I have to do basic body functions, and I have to make sure we have enough oxygen. I have to check blood levels, and I've got to make sure organs are working. Oh, and by the way, I have to answer that email and listen to that in that meeting and think about a problem, a solution to a problem. And I got to pick up the kids, and I got to make sure we're not late for something, and I got to plan the vacation. And so you are bombarding it with so much that it has to look for optimizing so that it can function most efficiently.
So, as you're guiding people through change, what do you find is, and it could be different for everybody, everybody's got different circumstances. What do you find is the greatest hurdle or the greatest challenge? Is there in them? Do you help guide them to this aha moment or a lucid moment or a moment of clarity? What happens through that progression, and what do you find is a hurdle that you have to overcome?
The hurdle is oftentimes the fear of I'm not sure what I'm going to see if I look there. I'm not sure that I can come through that. And so it's creating a space that says, trust that you don't have to fear, trust that you will come through it, trust that, we will walk through this together. And then in terms of, that's the resistance. And then in terms of the process, it is starting with understanding where'd you come from. You create these these definitions for basic things like safety and rejection and love and joy and all that in your early years. And then you spend the rest of your life building upon that. And so it's understanding those early years. How did you internalize the experience? And that's different for everyone. I could have had, an abusive parent, and I made a different meaning making of that than you did. And so what's the meaning that you made of that? And so the greatest opportunity becomes starting there. And that also becomes the greatest resistance, because it's, hey, there's a reason I kind of put that stuff away. So I'm afraid to go back there.
Mm, okay. So for anyone who's listening who's wondering, okay, what is the value in taking the time? This is one thing that I've heard from friends, colleagues. I'm very open about having been in therapy for quite some time. I've gone through coaching, and some people will ask, well, what the past is the past, or what's that worth, right? Why dig up skeletons? That's not worth anything, yada yada. So to someone who is skeptical or saying, well, what's worthwhile about going there or about seeking coaching or a resource to take me there? At least people, that's the thing. When people come to you, they're open. They're open because they're coming to you for help, right? But then maybe they get a little scared of the work they're going to have to do going back there. So, what would you say to someone who's skeptical and, okay, well, why is doing that deeper work, why is that worthwhile?
So two things I would say. One is, on the contrary, most of them are not open. They are there because something's got to change, or the board mandated them to come, or an executive mandated it, or something like that. So most of them are not open, and so it's a gradual process. And then in terms of the why, it's because it's affecting you anyway. So you might as well be. Remember, it's one brain, one database. It's in there anyway. It is affecting your decision making anyway. So you are better served being the sort of, understanding that narrative so that you can better control and author that narrative, rather than just letting things happen to you in life and not understanding why. Moving through life, not understanding why you do what you do, why you react to something a certain way. It's happening anyway.
Okay, that's interesting to know about your population that you work with in coaching, is because I just got hip to coaching and just understanding that that was even a thing or an industry this past year, right? And to me, I understood it as something that, when people maybe want a life coach or a career coach, but they don't necessarily want to go to therapy, they seek someone out, right? And that's interesting that men are forced to come talk to you, and
It's men and women. So
men and women,
that
yeah.
that yeah, that's absolutely true for both populations. Again, especially with high performers. I'm afraid
Okay.
you're going to mess with something that's going to mess up my level of performance, and I can't afford that. Not physically, mentally, emotionally, financially, all the above. So I'm not really keen on being here, but there's too much pressure in the system, or there's some external sort of mandate that says I don't have a choice.
Now that's a challenge, right? Because at least if you had clients coming to you with an open mind, right? But these are people coming to you very resistant. What's the secret sauce to overcoming that initial resistance to even be able to listen to what you're saying? Because one of the words you said earlier was foo-foo, right? Foo-foo or woo-woo, and it's nice to have the neuroscience to back up what you're saying, right? But I feel like you're right. Sometimes people are quick to dismiss this type of work as foo-foo or woo-woo, or it's not worth anything to me. And them coming to you so resistant, what is it like to overcome that? How do you know when you have somebody now with a more open or a growth mindset?
It takes a lot of patience. It takes the science helps, and then it takes really caring, like a lot of authenticity. But I truly care about these people and what happens, and I don't take lightly that you are trusting me with this deep personal space, and that really matters to me. So though putting sort of those things together, and the aha again doesn't happen where they wake up one day and they say, "Oh my God, I get it." It's a slow, sort of micro change that adds up to I woke up and I engaged with my team differently.
So that's an example of that. That's where I was going to go next is, okay, so what are those small incremental changes that people notice over months, years? So one of those things would be, okay, maybe I reacted or handled a situation differently. What
You're
else
more
do you
inclined to slow down. You're more inclined to pause to connect with people. You're more inclined to you try to connect authentically rather than just get the agenda done. Your language changes. Your sentiment and sort of feeling towards others changes. A lot of these little nuances.
And as they're doing this work, going through coaching with you, I read up on your setup framework because a tool is nice, right? A tool to have in your tool belt to be able to whip out and follow this framework, have a mental model of what to do in the moment. Can you talk a little bit more about setup and what that tool is?
I'm so glad you asked. I wish I could tattoo set up on everyone's forehead. So what happens is there is the decision making is much more complex than we think. And so let's say you and I are you're my boss and you're going to have a conversation with me about something that didn't go well. So a project I didn't deliver the way that you expected. So your assumption could be that the conversation is strictly about A and B, you and me talking about this project and failed expectations. But again, it doesn't work that way. It is one brain that is bringing everything to the table, and most of what it's doing is subconscious. And so setup allows you to take a quick inventory of what are all the factors that are present and affecting this moment, this decision, this conversation, this trigger. So the S is for your somatics. So it is the physical sensations in your body. Is my stomach in knots? Are my shoulders tense? And your somatic awareness is a whole data set that we often leave out. The E is for your emotions. So what are the totality of the emotions that I feel in this moment? Maybe I feel anxious about the conversation, but I also feel excited about a vacation, but I also feel sad about, my child is having not feeling well. And so there's, a variety of emotions that are present in me at this moment. The T is for my thoughts. So I've got some thoughts about you coming to talk to me in this project and what went wrong. And it's also because this other person didn't do this thing. And oh my God, you're not going to hear me. And this isn't fair. And I also have to, make sure I pick up the kids earlier today. And so there are all these thoughts that are running through my head. The U is so critical. It's for what else is in your universe. So if we go back to some of the examples I just gave, I'm excited about a vacation. I'm stressed that my in-laws are in town. I'm late on a project. I've got a big financial expense that's come up, for something at the house that I wasn't expecting. I had a great, lunch with a colleague, and that was really fulfilling. So there's all these things that are in my universe that I'm also bringing to the table. And the P is for your physiology. Are you hydrated? Are you hungry? Are you full? Is your blood sugar? How is your sleep? Like all of those are affecting the engine that is running this machine. And so when you come to me and talk to me about failed expectations on a project and you think, we both think that's the only conversation we're having or not, we're bringing all of the rest of that to the table too. And so setup allows you to take a quick inventory of that.
I like that. I like that quick mental model and just running through a checklist of things because I've had at home and personal relationships and at work where I'm not communicating my best, I'm not thinking clearly, and then I think, oh God, have I even drank water today? Have I drank anything besides coffee? Have I eaten today? Do I need to go for a walk? For me, I come back to physiology and somatics. Those are basic principles, right? Just take care of your body. Can you talk more about somatics? Can we dwell there for a second? I recently started learning about interoception. I've heard it called both ways, pronounced both ways. Can you talk more about what that is and why that is its own form of embodied intelligence, right? Listening to your body and understanding that information doesn't just come top down, it also comes bottom up.
So your body is responding to all these things that are happening in your universe, from the physiological as well as to the information that you're consuming. Whether it was oh God, last night I watched this first episode of this TV show, and it ended literally on this really gory note. And I was like, Layla, why did you do that? Now that gory thing is going to be like in your brain right before you go to bed. And I didn't
Oh.
know. And so, you know, the I say that to say as an example of like what I'm, you know, consuming. And so not only is your brain processing all of that, your body is processing all of that. And so, you know, the joy of a loving moment, or the awe, you know, being in awe in nature, or you know, the sadness, the heaviness of a difficult situation. And especially if you're someone who is, you know, more cerebral, or, you know, doesn't sit in self-awareness or emotions very deeply, your body sometimes is a safer sort of starting point, or a data set to explore, to say, okay, well, I don't really want to look at how I'm feeling, but at least, you know, emotionally. But let me start with taking a look at, you know, what is my body saying? Do I have a tightness somewhere? You know, do I feel more settled and present? And what can I learn from there? What, you know, what pathway can I explore starting there?
I'm wondering, in your work with high performers and knowing that they tend to kind of live in their head, they're more cerebral, are there certain maybe frameworks within the framework of setup or tools that you use to help them get in touch with their somatics and this noticing, right? Because one thing I found in my interoception research is that some people have this ability more so than others, to be able to sense what's going on internally, you know, from something as simple as like, oh, my bladder's full, I have to pee, right? To having, you know, a really good gut instinct and intuition. So, how do you help people get from this cerebral state, maybe to even resetting their default to, oh, let me check in with my body first. This is the first place I need to go.
So there's a simple, in the sense that it doesn't take much, way to start that is just doing a body scan, and literally starting at your head or your toes, wherever you want to, and scanning your body and saying, you know, what do I notice in each body part? And if I notice something, can I stop and pay attention to it and give it color and context and texture and all that? Can I release it? Can I remove it? Can I touch it? And so just scanning through your body to see what you find. And a lot of times initially that it's so foreign, it's nothing. I don't see anything. I don't feel anything. I don't notice anything. And then slowing down eventually starts to open that doorway to say, okay, well, I can kind of feel something here.
Hmm. And that takes practice. I mean, that's not something that, yeah, is just going to show up overnight, right? Resetting your default settings takes quite some time. And like you said, it's gradual. You notice, oh, I reacted a little bit better in that conversation, or oh, I handled that decision a little bit better.
And
Um,
it's just like any other thing that you try to strengthen, you know, your physical health, your fiscal health, your mental health, that all of these things take consistent practice. And that when you fall out of practice, you notice, and then you just get back into practice. And, you know, like whether it's my morning routine or whether it's getting out into nature, I can tell when, you know, these things are so default for me now, and I can tell the difference when I've fallen out of practice, and then, you know, the benefit of getting back into practice. But I have to keep practicing.
yeah, that's a key point. I wish, and I think this is kind of shifting, but I would like to see a world in which we value building skills like self-awareness, emotional regulation, you know, our emotional and cognitive capacities as much as we value going to the gym and building muscle, right? Same thing. You know, you have to put in your reps. So I'm curious, how do you see the age of AI evolving and this pendulum swing, this skills swing that we're having to where we are valuing humanities and fundamentally human things? How do you see self awareness playing into that? And maybe what other skills do you see being critical in the age of AI?
I think self-awareness will continue to, self-awareness as the root of everything else that then births will continue to be critical. because it is through that pathway that I can then create more connection with myself and with others, that I can then do some of the things that you're saying that AI is still not as capable in. And I think the other piece is the humility is the new ego. That the what it takes to succeed, what it takes to push and drive, what it takes, that I cannot keep up with the rate at which AI can perform certain tasks that my ego got fulfilled by being able to achieve before. AI is going to outpace me in that. But AI can't outpace me yet in the humility, in the connection, in the engagement. And so if ego was the thing that created drive that then led to a lot of success, humility, I think, is going to do much more for that now.
I'll double click on humility there. So I recently went through ProSci's change management practitioner program with a focus in AI adoption and AI rollouts. And I talked to a classmate in my cohort who had surveyed 65,000 employees at the organization that she worked for and found that the number one trait that employees admired in a leader was humility.
Oh my God. Love
Isn't
that.
isn't that incredible? Yeah. And I just I think that just goes to show as a leader, you want to, and I'm sure as high performers, right? You want to have all the answers. You want to seem like you've got it figured out. Like you're going to lead and you're just going to you know what's going on, right? And you're going to execute. You have a plan for everything, you have an answer for everything. And I value, and it's this survey of 65,000 employees, confirms, right? We value authenticity and epistemic humility and just being able to say, I don't know, or I don't have a good answer to that question right now, but let's figure it out together.
And I think especially in a social media world where I'm able to filter and edit and show the best of myself, and more and more and more easily and more accessible to everyone, that I find more comfort and relatability in knowing that this is actually the unfiltered version of you, and you didn't get it right, and it didn't look perfect, and I feel safer in relating to that. And I increasingly I tell people we're all just doing the best we can, figuring it out one day at a time, messing it up half the time, and continuing to take one step forward, and three steps back and two steps forward. And the more we can do that together, in community with the people around us, feeling connected to others, feeling seen by others in that experience, the more I think we thrive, as a people.
Hmm. I like that. The two steps forward, one step back is still one step forward, right? And sometimes it's easy to get stuck. It's easy for our brains to get stuck in that black and white, all or nothing thinking. Is that something that you find in high performers that, they might have this high processing capacity, but I also find that sometimes the strengths can also be a weakness and can be a hindrance sometimes. And I know I get stuck in black and white thinking sometimes. So, and you talking about these high performers expecting like an immediate ROI, or, how is this going to help me? I need to see it. And just not understanding that this is something that's gradual. It's not a light switch. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to be this massive change that is black and white where you compare yourself to who you were yesterday and you're a brand new person today. How do you overcome that black and white, all or nothing mindset?
Well, and it's also very humbling for them because you give them something to do and they figure out how to do it and knock it out of the park. And this doesn't work like that. And so it's humbling that, this isn't going to work the same way. And the overcome is back to the basics. How do I, create trust between us, to the extent that I can? How do I show up authentically? How do I give you some science? And how do I give you empathy? How do I try to create space for you to feel seen and heard? How do I give you human basics that you have sort of pushed beyond more often than you needed to get to where you are? And there's no It's not a judgment. There's no right or wrong. They're remarkable, and what they've done has served them well. And there's a lot of praise in that. So it's not to say that, hey, you did these great things, and guess what? Now you're broken, or you did it wrong all along, or this emptiness is because you messed it up. There's no judgment in any of that. Again, you've achieved remarkable things. You got to where you got to that most people can't, and coming from often adverse backgrounds, and having challenges, and not feeling understood, and all of the things. And it's
Mm-hmm.
saying, hey, now there's room for you to stop and breathe.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that. I like we're very quick to judge ourselves and we are our worst critics. I like reframing that default for judgment as curiosity. Let me get curious about why I'm feeling this way or why I'm reacting this way or why that came out that way, and that to me seems like a much kinder way to approach ourselves and our brains and what's going on than judgment and being critical of ourselves. One thing I'm curious about, because I will share, when I was looking for a coach, it was really important to me to look for somebody who I could resonate with. So I ended up finding a woman who had worked in big law, and she made her big law exit and became an entrepreneur and started a podcast and all these things. Are you a high performer? Do you identify as a high performer? And do you feel like that helps your clients connect with you and resonate with you?
Good question. I don't know that I'm a high performer. Uh, when I look at it as defined by the people that I serve, so I definitely don't perform at their level, but I would say I perform higher than average.
Just creeping on you and looking at your LinkedIn, I would call you a high performer. So I think you're being very humble in this moment, and you unlock and transform other high performers. I mean, that work, unlocking and unleashing human potential. That's like the most awe-inspiring work to me. We all have this potential in us, and I think one of the saddest things, really, the part of the human experience is not being able to, or thinking that you can't get that, or you can't have that, or you can't be that person, right? Having this mindset that tells you I can't. Um, I'm very
If
curious.
I could
Yeah,
say
go ahead.
something about that real quick, it's oftentimes these people sit in these super influential positions, and they lead, hundreds of people, thousands of people, whatever the case may be. And the level of pressure, the level of expectation, coupled with no outlets, few if any places where they feel seen and understood, which is this fundamental human need. And so when it's remarkable to see that when you give them that, what opens up, and it's almost like they literally exhale physically, mentally, emotionally, and then sort of realize, oh God, this is what I was missing. And I'm an outsider to them. So I get to watch this gradual progression of change in their language, in their behavior, in their, thought process, and in their approach to things. And it never stops being remarkable and beautiful to see this person that performs at this impeccable level, that also then adds this other area of fulfillment to their lives.
Hmm. It's really nice to hear you talk about it that way, because you can see you just light up and beaming, and just the love and the passion that you have for your work. It shows. So I think you found your calling. To the extent that you feel like you have found your calling, it seems like you have found your calling. Um, I want to ask you, so the theme here being clarity and lucid moments and just slowing down and pressing pause on life long enough to hear ourselves think. Have you yourself, whether it be in your career, in your personal life, in the work that you do, in your training, have you ever had a moment where you yourself had this kind of moment of self-awareness, like, oh,
I
what
would
was that?
say mine are, sort of life events that definitely have been critical, but in terms of the totality of it, It's more the gradual, I mess something up and then I try to fix it and then I try to get better. I sort of, be a better human, and that goes well for a while. And then I have another speed bump and then I text 10 steps back and then I think, oh, I just realized a new thing. So I would say mine is this very gradual rather than these, oh my God, I woke up one day and, realized something. Those little hiccups happen along the way, but I believe that even when they feel like they were this aha moment, they were a culmination of a lot of micro moments that happened before that. And so that's why I go back to, especially the noisier the world gets, that self-awareness is the best thing that you can do for yourself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about that noise. Let's dwell on noise for a little bit, especially in the age of AI and AI slop. And we are living in a very interesting world right now. And I'm curious on what you would define as noise and what that does. We've already talked a little bit about it, right? Your brain has to filter all of the stimuli that it is encountering, right? So, what would you define as noise in our technological age? And how can we both turn our attention inward to ourselves and focus, right? Because I see the camera frame as attention, and then I see the lens as our ability to focus on something. Can you talk a little bit more about noise? What is the noise that we're talking about? And how can you find a signal? I know that Claude's favorite word recently is signal. It really likes the word signal. So how can we find signal in today's noise?
I'll give you a tangible example. I appreciate trying to learn more about AI. But if you go down that rabbit hole, there's an infinite amount of information, anxiety producing, informative, inspiring, you name it. And so it's, how does this consumption make me feel? And so if I'm looking for, is something noise or not, I can go back to at the end of that consumption, was I more fulfilled, energized, inspired, something, or was I no better off or worse off or more anxious or more depressed or more whatever? So if I stick on the AI example, I research AI and I look at what's it doing in the world, what do people think, what are some trends, what are some impacts, etc. But I sort of meter that to the point where it then becomes oh my God, it's doom and gloom. Oh no, it's the best thing ever. And so I meter that to when it starts to feel like this is overwhelming, that's turned into noise. So I find that what's the appropriate amount and topic of consumption for me that feels informative and feels maybe inspiring and feels realistic without turning into all that other stuff. That's a tangible example of how do I pick a thing and the distinction between noise and not.
I really like that. And that takes us back to somatics and just having a check-in, right, with your body after you're consuming, whether it be social media or you talk to AI for 20 minutes. How do I feel after that? And that kind of being the gut check on like, okay, well, if I don't feel good, that was too much. Shouldn't do that again.
This morning was a great example. I was introduced to this AI podcast. And so I listened to the first one, to one episode. Oh, it's kind of cool. Some of it's new information, some of it's not, whatever. And then I listened to another episode, on my walk. And I thought, oh, okay, less fulfilling, less feel like I got something new, feeling a little more like, hey, it's starting to sort of veer towards the too much and repetitive info and the, oh my God, what's going to happen and whatever. And so I stopped at 2. I had these 2 episodes, kind of took what I needed. And when I started to turn into, this is going to feel like if you click on one more thing, it's going to be, either the same thing or the whatever. Number three would have been noise.
Okay. When you say AI podcast, was this one of those podcasts that was created completely by AI? No, like
No,
no
no, no,
human
sorry. It
talking?
was about what's happening in AI.
Okay. Okay. Gotcha. I can attest to that experience and at least trying to reduce the noise. Back in 2020, my husband and I deleted all of our social media. We don't engage with social media. I have a LinkedIn, for professional reasons, but what's funny is you find even though I got so much time back, my screen time was like 6 to 8 hours a day on my phone. I'm like, okay, that's insane. How about not? Imagine what I could be doing with that time. It's funny, but I look at it and like, 6 years later, I find myself still very easily spending an hour on LinkedIn scrolling. It's so hard to consciously consume. And the point that you're making about AI, I read about this concept called, it was in Psychology Today about psychological debt. This is so interesting. So it basically talks about how so many tabs or maybe unclosed, open loops, right? Drain your cognitive resources and they just sit as open tabs buffering in your brain. And what AI does is it creates more of those, right? We think that we're going to be more efficient or creative or whatever with AI, and we are to a degree, but you can have too much of a good thing, right? So AI, if you notice, with ChatGPT or Claude, whatever bot you're using, after every answer, it gives you, three options. Oh, well, would you like me to do this? Or would you like me to follow up with this? And it's almost like it's preying on your brain's desire to want to close a loop, to want to have an ending, right? And it just keeps you going. And I find that when I exit a conversation with AI, I do feel that psychological. I feel like I haven't closed a loop and it just stays there open. I think to your point, I think self-awareness is the key, is being able to recognize, right? Okay, how am I feeling right now? And even getting into skills, like I read this article the other day about metacognition and how that is going to be a really important skill in the future, is being able to think about your own thinking, especially as you're engaging with AI and knowing, and it takes self-awareness to be able to do this, right? But knowing your own emotional, cognitive assumptions, in a conversation, or assumptions in the way that you're asking a question or framing a question, which I think is going to be super important. So we talked about self-awareness. You named self-awareness is going to continue to be a critical skill, metacognition, right? In terms of thinking about your own thinking. What other skill do you think is going to be really important that is just fundamentally human, that AI is never going, I don't want to say never because I don't like to, who knows, we might have some type of humanoid AI thing, but I see the human body, the embodied experience that we have as humans, as being fundamentally distinct from anything that AI we could ever try to replicate with humanoid robots or AI. So what other fundamentally human element of our existence, what makes us us, and how can we continue to cultivate that in the age of AI?
I think if you don't mind, I'm going to answer a different question.
Please,
I'm
yes.
going to double click on something you said. You said something to the effect of, it's really hard to stop myself from scrolling for an hour, whatever the case may be. And so I want to double click on that to say, yes, it's designed to be really hard, which goes back to that's why self-awareness becomes critical. And I thought what you were going to say is, therefore, so what other skill, metacognition, self-awareness, what other skill is going to be imperative? And it's coupling that self-awareness with the discipline of intention. So it's self-awareness to say, how am I feeling about the podcast, consuming podcast number 3? And then the discipline to be intentional to say, hey, Leila, you can tell that's not going to feel as good. Turn it off, as opposed to flying past that. So self-awareness, metacognition, and the discipline to be intentional. When you notice number 3 is not going to work for you, and the system is designed to get you to click on it anyway, it's the discipline to say, I'm going to be intentional about this and and be the one that's in charge, rather than having the, Claude's prompt to say, which one of these things do you want me to do next? To say, you're not going to decide that engagement for me. I'm going to decide to step away.
Absolutely. I love that. Discipline. That's exactly it. And that's to your point about feeling like you're, getting sucked in, and that you're being intentional and you're purposeful and you're in the driver's seat of what is happening when you're engaging with technology. I think that's part of what I was feeling back when I got off of social media. That was around the time when screen time, Apple had your screen time, and I looked at it and I can't believe that I am being sucked in and drawn in, and I don't have the willpower to get out. So I was like, okay, I'm just gonna I'm just gonna delete all of them, just get off of them,
In a world where it's going to be increasingly hard for me to do that, because the technology is going to be increasingly better versed at getting me not to.
Mm. How do you?
So I'm battling a big
Yeah.
beast that is much more well equipped and savvy than I am. I'm battling a beast that is designed to manipulate and sort of work with the way my brain works, in curiosity and closed loops and all the above.
Okay, so let's dwell on discipline. How can we practice and build discipline in such a noisy world?
One step at a time, and connecting it to a value system. I don't like getting up every morning to work out, but my value system says, you like food, you want to be healthy, you like to hike and be outside and be active and do whatever. You want those things, then those are valuable to you. This is what it takes. How important is that to you? It is so important that in my value system, it makes me get up to do this so I can do that.
Yeah, I love values. That makes me think, okay, I was realizing I was valuing my time and my cognitive resources and my autonomy, and feeling like I was getting sucked in by these things,
You actually are a great example. You valued, let's say, for example, whatever, social media did for you. You had a baby. That baby outranked in your value system whatever scrolling did for you. And so even if you hadn't deleted it off your phone, I bet you wouldn't leave your baby hungry in exchange for scrolling on Instagram, right?
Absolutely.
So that's a perfect example of how your value system defined your behavior.
Okay, let's dwell on values. I recently did this assessment. Have you ever heard of the book Becoming You by Susie Welch? It's so good. I think you would love it. She teaches this Becoming You class. I think it's in NYU's Stern School of Business, their MBA program. And I think this class should be taught much earlier, maybe even in high school or undergrad. But I just read this book at 29, totally transformed how I see many things. But she has this assessment in her book, and then you can go to her website and like take it afterwards, and the whole thing, pay for the upgraded version. But I read in her book, so a lot of times people do not know, she found in her research, people don't know what their values are. They haven't ever gotten clear on what their values are. And they might name something like, when she would ask people, okay, well, what are your values? They would name something like a personality trait or like a character trait, honesty. That's not really a value. That's not what fundamentally drives you as a human being to wake up every day and keep doing what you're doing and engage with the world in the way that you do. And it was really interesting going through that work, because that's not something that we value in, our education system, K through 12 or even undergrad. Like, we don't seem to put an emphasis on the important work of self-discovery and self-exploration and self-awareness, right? And I'm just wondering, from your perspective, what do you find when you try to get to these deeper values of these high performers and drawing out an awareness of that? Do you find the same thing? Like, people just have never gotten clear on their values, or they misname them, they don't exactly know what they are?
Yeah, I think it is a lot of times it is work that's new to them, but you are able to create an understanding of that when you say, okay, well, you you may not call it values, but you have a sense of what are the things that you can identify through time continue to drive your behavior. Let's say it's loyalty. Let's say it is wanting to make a difference, impact. And you can sort of look at that. And then there's also, hey, as I continue to become a new me, maybe some of those values shift in a way that into things that I didn't feel were safe or possible for me before.
I like the idea that we can recognize that values evolve, right? Um, we evolve as people, so naturally our values are going to evolve. I took a values inventory when we had a daughter, right? And I may not have valued engaging with my family as much before, but family now was whoop, my own family, right? Growing my own family and caring for my own family and being present for my own family was whoop, right at the top. And even technically not even right at the top. When I did this assessment, impact or radius, as the author calls it, was my number one value, and family was number four. And what's so funny is she mentions in her book is, she'll see people change their answers when they get their assessment results, and she sees, they see that family is not in their top five. They freak out and they're like, oh God, okay, let me go change it. Like, let me go do something to make sure that family is up there. And, she basically says, like, no, like that's okay. Don't judge yourself and don't feel badly about that. You're allowed to have other values that motivate you as a human being. And she gives like some examples of, people who, that's their number one thing. People who highly value family versus people who like, medium value family versus people who that's definitely not on their top five, and what that might look like. And she's basically just giving you permission in this book to not feel badly about that. I thought it was funny. She found that people tried to change their answers when they saw that family was not top five.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Love them.
So really good book. Would highly recommend it. So okay, in terms of values, what are your core values and what drives Leila Entezam?
My top three are faith, love, and gratitude. So I can look
Okay.
back decades and see that those three have been the backbone of so many things I've done.
Okay. Let's dive into them. Can we talk about faith and what faith means to you? Faith, spirituality means so many different things for people. What does that mean to Layla?
So for me, it is this anchor that when there's no one else to turn to, there's nothing else makes sense. That it is something greater than self, that gives me some comfort and some way to make meaning. And in that, also the idea of living greater than self. So the world is not just about me,
Mm-hmm.
and faith sort of gives me a frame for that.
Mm-hmm.
And then love is this idea of what I was saying about, hey, we're all just kind of figuring this out. And we've all got basic needs, and we've all got, something we're going through. And man, we could all use some more love and kindness. And so, where does anchoring myself in that value allow me to be kinder, to be more forgiving, be more empathetic, to care more about the work I do, to try to be more selfless. Again, getting it wrong half the time, but you can try. And then gratitude is a big one for me. There's so much in every moment, in every way, to be grateful for. And when something is taken away from you, you are that much more present to what it's like to have it. So yeah, I think gratitude is definitely, especially like if I'm in a funk for, a funk of a mood or something, and I think, all right, like let's look for, some things to be grateful for to shift us out of this.
What's one thing that you are grateful for today, July 22nd, 2026?
My morning walk this morning,
Oh,
that I was like, God, I don't want to be out here this morning. And my pace was slower than normal, but I did it. And I was grateful that I was like, look at you. Good for you.
that's awesome. Way to get up and do that. Is that so that's part of your daily routine? You get up and you go for a walk.
I
Oh, that's
get up
awesome.
and work out. So whether it's something else, yeah, it's part
Yeah,
of my
that's
morning.
awesome. Something is better than nothing, right? Keep just keep moving forward. So you said nature is super important to you and being out in nature and experiencing awe in nature. How do you how do you practice that? Like, so you like walking? Do you explore parks, national parks? Do you travel? How do you get in touch with your love and appreciation of nature?
Hiking. I try to get out as often as I can. Being out in various forms of nature, the mountains. I'm blessed where I live. There's so much variety of that, not far. Travel and experiencing different landscapes and the awe there. The ocean, being out in it, around it, whatever, any of that. Truly, I always tell people if I'm in a bad mood, then just kick me outside.
It does. It does improve your mood 1,000%. I will say that going for even when I was working, you're in an office all day, right? I found that going for an afternoon walk, whew, completely turned my afternoon around, right? And you think better after walking. I would get my best ideas and creative ideas and connect dots that I couldn't connect just sitting in front of a computer for 8 hours a day, right? Like it's so important. And I read the other day that awe experiencing awe, having more experiences of awe throughout your lifetime can actually reduce the degree of inflammation in your body. Like experiencing awe has physiological effects in your body. Isn't that crazy?
It
I
does.
just, I just thought that was wild. I want to circle back to your self-awareness work. And again, the theme here being clarity. And I know you said your clarity and progressive self-awareness throughout life, happen through little incremental moments. And it's not like it was this, smack you in the face kind of moment. Can you take us to one of those moments and maybe paint a picture of who Leila was in that moment and who Leila was after that moment?
Hmm. I can give you a present day one, increasingly looking to simplify my life, whether that is in what I want next or what's around me or who's around me today, or even down to like the foods you consume. I try to be really intentional about my time. So, how I'm spending my time. That would be an example of, you know, something that's shifting from awareness.
Hmm. Okay. So, in terms of being more intentional with your time, do you find that you were someone who's like a workaholic, or you were spending your time almost accidentally instead of on purpose? Or what's like, walk us through the transition? And I mean, literally, just practically, like, what does a day look like with you living life on purpose and accounting for your time on purpose?
Well, so an example with the work, question you asked is where before it would be, no, these things have to get done today, saying it's okay that these didn't get done, and I've kind of reached my limit for the day, and simplifying that tendency to feel like no, the list has to get done, to say no, it's okay. It's not, the world's not going to end.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and then to your point about the intentionality, it's to say, okay, how is, this, however you spent your time in downtime and uptime and in between, how did that feel? Back to was it fulfilling? Was it not? Was it noise? And then what needs to shift from there?
Hmm. So, downtime, can you talk a little bit more about the importance of downtime? Because I feel like high performers, we have to be performing, we have to be doing, right? And maybe we don't value rest or downtime as much.
Yeah, I value my downtime a lot. And it is just a chance to reset, a chance to slow down, a chance to refuel. And that downtime can mean different things for different people, whether it is staring at a tree or, slowing down to connect differently with someone in your life, sort of connect more deeply with someone in your life, or cooking a meal you really like. It's what's the thing that allows you to sort of just exhale.
So, that was a really fun conversation. So thank you for that. Thank you for the gift of that conversation.
Likewise.
Thank you. I want to close, so I ask all my guests the same question. And if you've ever seen Wicked the musical, so there's this song For Good, and the line in that song that moves me to tears every time is, because I knew you, I have been changed for good. And I'm wondering if you can think of someone in your life, you don't have to say their name out loud, but you can if you want to, that has said something, done something, impacted you in a way that maybe changed how you view Leila Entezam, or how you view the world, how you show up in the world. And what would you say to that person if you could finish the line, because I knew you?
First of all, it's such a beautiful closing. So thank you for being thoughtful with that. And mine would be one of mine would be my mom. That because I knew you, I believe in being selfless, in the value of community, in being kind, in unconditional love, in believing in goodness. So yeah, that's my choice.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Leila. Thank you so much for joining us on Lucid Commons, and
Thank you.
until next time.